Alright, welcome to the 101st Henry George Daily Devotional. I've been gone. I went to see family and also to a national conference of state legislators, where I advocated for the land value tax with a few different Georgist groups. There were like 7 or 8 of us. I might write a blog about that. Hard to just sum it up real quick. We did talk to some state senators, state legislators of other kinds, but I don't think the revolution has begun. Alright, this is Book 10. The Law of Human Progress, Chapter 1. The Current Theory of Human Progress, Its Insufficiency. Looks like from my notes last time, everyone was saying the reason some races prosper and others do not is because of their innate capacity. George says that is incorrect. Alright, let's go. This is where divine interpretation. Okay. The practical outcome of this theory is in a sort of hopeful fatalism of Test. Tests. Test. Alright, I'm back. I did not have the dongle of my headset plugged in because I had unplugged it when I left for that conference. Alright, sorry for that. George writes, well, now I'm concerned that the earlier voice, well, we hadn't said anything really important, let's be honest. George writes, the practical outcome of this theory is in a sort of hopeful fatalism, of which current literature is full. Ooh. In semi-scientific or popularized form, this may perhaps be seen in best because frankest expression in The Martyrdom of Man by Winwood Reade, a writer of singular vividness and power. This book is in reality a history of progress, or rather, a monograph upon its causes and methods, and will well repay perusal for its vivid pictures. Whatever may be thought of the capacity of the author for philosophic generalization. Okay, so maybe it doesn't have good philosophic generalization. I don't know. The connection between subject and title may be seen by the conclusion. I give to universal history a strange but true title, The Martyrdom of Man. In each generation the human race has been tortured, that their children might profit by their woes. Our own prosperity is founded on the agonies of the past. Is it therefore unjust that we also should suffer for the benefit of those who are to come? A hopeful fatalism. In this view, progress is the result of forces which work slowly, steadily, and remorselessly for the elevation of man. War, slavery, tyranny, superstition, famine, and pestilence, the want and misery which fester in modern civilization, these terrible things, are the impelling causes which drive man on, by eliminating poorer types and extending the higher. And hereditary transmission is the power by which advances are fixed, and past advances made the footing for new advances. I just listened to an interview of Cristiano Ronaldo where he was talking about how the new generation of players have had it so easy that they're soft. Uh, I think he's right that they have had it easy, and maybe they're not quite as like imbalanced in their day-to-day emotional state of being and trying to like latching on to playing soccer, football as a complete survival mechanism in their life. However, it's pretty much true that every generation of skilled sport just gets more and more skillful. Although it doesn't seem as, I also just watched a video about whether or not we're actually getting, much faster, and that's, you know, that's more of a biological limit, I would guess. But in terms of developing of skill, um, and I would sort of think of fair governance as a skill issue rather than an evolutionary issue. Anyway, I guess that's sort of relevant here. The individual is the result of changes thus impressed upon and perpetuated through a long series of past individuals, and the social organization takes its form from the individuals of which it is composed. Thus, while this theory is, as Herbert Spencer says, from the study of sociology, radical to a degree beyond anything which current radicalism conceives, inasmuch as it looks for changes in the very nature of man, it is at the same time conservative to a degree beyond anything conceived by current conservatism. Conservatism. Inasmuch as it holds that no change can avail save these slow changes in men's natures. Philosophers may teach that this does not lessen the duty of endeavoring to reform abuses, just as the theologians who taught predestinarianism insisted on the duty of all to struggle for salvation. This was a big debate in my youth with Christian young people. If we're saved, if our salvation is predestined, why do we have to do anything or behave anyway, particularly? And you get into some fun sort of circular logic traps a lot of times when you discuss that. Love. Love is the answer. George continues. But as generally apprehended, the result is fatalism. Do what we may, the mills of the gods grind on, regardless either of our aid or our hindrance. I allude to this only to illustrate what I take to be the opinion now rapidly spreading and permeating common thought. Not that in the search for truth any regard for its effects should be permitted to bias the mind, but this I take to be the current view of civilization, that it is the result of forces operating in the way indicated, which slowly change the character and improve and elevate the powers of man. That the difference between civilized man and savage is of a long race education which has become permanently fixed in mental organization, and that this improvement tends to go on increasingly to a higher and higher civilization. All right, I kind of zoned out during that sentence. So George says, I take this to be the current view of civilization. This is the current view, which I'm betting George doesn't agree with. So civilization is the result of forces operating in the way indicated, which is this sort of war on tyranny and pain, the woes, the martyrdom of man, everything. Yep. So that's the way indicated. And it slowly changed the character and improve and elevate the powers of man, that the difference between civilized man and the savage is of a long race education which has become permanently fixed in mental organization, and that this improvement tends to go on increasingly to a higher and higher civilization. Right. Somehow we're like hereditarily or passing down the right genes, I guess, to select for the people who are more and more civilized. I guess that's sort of what George is saying, what most people seem to think is the law of civilization, or how civilization is improving. I guess George continues summing up their viewpoints. We have reached such a point that progress seems to be natural with us, and we look forward confidently to the greater achievements of the coming race. Some even holding that the progress of science will finally give men immortality and enable them to make bodily the tour not only of the planets, but of the fixed stars, and at length to manufacture suns and systems for themselves. This is all mostly from the Winwood Reads The Martyrdom of Man. Yeah, so I know where George is going here, but I won't totally spoil it. Yes, but this idea that this idea that somehow each generation of humans born is just slightly more good than the last one. I think slightly misunderstands how, you know, sort of genetically or hereditarily things are passed on. So George writes, but without soaring to the stars, the moment that this theory of progression, which seems so natural to us amid an advancing civilization, looks around the world, it comes against an enormous fact. The fixed, petrified civilizations. I guess that is the enormous fact. The majority of the human race today have no idea of progress. The majority of the human race today look, as until a few generations ago our own ancestors looked, upon the past as the time of human perfection. The difference between the savage and the civilized man may be explained on the theory that the former, that is the savage, is as yet so imperfectly developed that his progress is hardly apparent. But how, upon the theory that human progress is the result of general and continuous causes, shall we account for the civilizations that have progressed so far and then stopped? It cannot be said of the Hindu and of the Chinaman, as it may be said of the savage, that our superiority is the result of a longer education, that we are, as it were, the grown men of nature, while they are the children. The Hindus and the Chinese were civilized when we were savages. They had great cities, highly organized and powerful governments, literatures, philosophies, polished manners, considerable division of labor, large commerce, and elaborate arts, when our ancestors were wandering barbarians, living in huts and skin tents, not a whit further advanced than the American Indians. While we have progressed from this savage state to 19th century civilization, they have stood still. If progress be the result of fixed laws, inevitable and eternal, which impel men forward, how shall we account for this? All right, I'm keeping it short. I'm ending it there. Think about it. Write your answer in the comments. How shall we account for this? That many civilizations have stalled or crumbled, and the idea that progress is a inevitable, slow progressing, hereditary process. How do we explain that? All right. I look forward to your brilliant ideas.